I met Christian in the most ordinary way, at a church picnic. He was charming, the kind of man who made people laugh without even trying. My friends said I was lucky, that I'd found a God-fearing man with a steady job and a protective nature. I believed them. The first few months were pure bliss. He'd bring flowers after work, hold my hand during prayer, and send me little Bible verses in the middle of the day. My mother adored him. My pastor even used us as an example of godly courtship during a sermon. We got married less than a year after meeting. But something changed the moment we came back from our honeymoon. Christian's smile faded, replaced by a constant tension in his jaw. One night, he came home from work and slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I asked what was wrong, and his answer wasn't words. It was the sound of his fist hitting the table. "Don't question me," he said, his eyes cold. First, I thought it was stress. I tried to make things easier, cooking his favorite meals, keeping the house spotless, avoiding arguments. But the more I tried, the more unpredictable he became. If dinner was 5 minutes late, he'd shove the plate away. If I spoke while he was watching TV, he'd mute me with a glare sharp enough to cut through bone. The real terror began 3 months into our marriage. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. A message from an old classmate asking how I was. Christian walked in, glanced at my screen, and in one swift motion, ripped the phone from my hand. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded. I explained, but it didn't matter. He accused me of cheating, called me names I'd never heard from his mouth before, and by the end of the night, my cheek was swollen from the slap I made him give me. From then on, he controlled everything, my phone, my friends, even when I could see my family. He installed cameras in the house for security, but I knew they were there to watch me. He'd replay footage of me making coffee or talking on the porch, asking, "Why were you smiling? Who were you thinking about?" The worst night came in winter. It was snowing, and I had burned dinner because the power flickered. Christian came home, smelled the charred food, and his face twisted into something almost inhuman. He grabbed my wrist so hard I heard a pop. He dragged me to the door, shoved me outside barefoot, and locked it. I stood there shivering for what felt like hours, snow cutting into my skin, before he finally let me in. His only words were, "Next time you'll learn." I prayed every night for a way out, but fear kept me chained. It wasn't until a neighbor knocked one evening, saying they'd heard screaming, that I saw a glimpse of escape. Christian stood behind me, hand on my shoulder, squeezing so tightly my vision blurred. I lied to the neighbor, told them it was just a movie playing too loud. That night, I cried myself to sleep, realizing I had become exactly what I never thought I'd be. A prisoner in my own home, married to a man everyone still thought was an angel. And I knew one day, if I didn't leave, Christian's lessons would end with more than just bruises. At first, I thought his jealousy was sweet, felt like a romance novel. He told me he couldn't stand the thought of me talking to another man because he was afraid of losing me. He said he loved me so much, he wanted me all to himself. When a coworker asked me to get a coffee, he'd playfully scoff, "Does he not have any friends?" I'd laugh it off, thinking how cute and protective he was. But romance is not built on control. What I mistook for affection was a slow, tightening leash. Started with the phone. He'd ask for my password, just to see the funny pictures. Then he'd go through my messages, and if he found a text from a male friend, he'd get quiet. Not angry, just quiet. And that was worse. He'd leave my phone on the counter with the messages open, a silent accusation that hung in the air for hours. I started to police myself. I deleted texts. I stopped responding to old friends. All because the emotional fallout was too exhausting to deal with. Slowly, his jealousy became a full-blown obsession. He would show up at my job to surprise me, but I knew he was checking on me. He'd time me if I went out with my girlfriends. He'd ask me to stop wearing clothes he thought were too revealing, saying, "You don't need to try so hard to get attention. It wasn't about what I was wearing. It was about who might see me. He made me feel like I was a terrible person for simply existing in the world. I stopped seeing my friends, because it was easier than listening to his passive-aggressive comments and enduring the interrogation afterward. I made my world so small that it only contained him. The first time it got physical, it was over a text message. A new number popped up on my phone, and it was from a delivery guy asking if I was home. He saw it on the counter, and a switch just flipped. The cold, quiet man disappeared, and a storm took his place. He screamed that I was cheating on him, that I was a liar, that I was no better than the kind of women who flirt with everyone. I tried to explain, to show him the delivery confirmation, but he didn't care. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. He didn't hit me, not then, but he held me, his face inches from mine, and his voice was a low, terrifying growl. "Don't you ever lie to me again," he said. "Don't you ever make me look stupid." Afterward, he was full of apologies. He cried, he held me, he promised me it was just the stress from work, that his love for me was so strong it just made him crazy sometimes. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man crying in my arms was the real him. But the man who squeezed my arm and left a bruise was the real him, too. And I knew that from then on, the monster he was trying to hide inside himself had a new tool. The jealousy wasn't a sign of love. It was a prelude to the violence he had been hiding all along, and I was too lost in his web of control to see it coming until it was too late. I remember the first time I realized my husband wasn't the man I thought I married. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't a scream or a slap. It was quiet. Too quiet. We'd been married 6 months. He was charming in public, attentive when people were around. But at home, the air felt different. Like walking into a room you know has just been argued in. Even when nothing was said, my chest felt heavy. That night, I came home from work 15 minutes late. Traffic. Called him, but he didn't pick up. When I opened the door, the house was dark except for the dim light from the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, hands folded, staring at nothing. "You're late," he said, without looking at me. I explained about the traffic. My voice was careful, too careful. He didn't respond, just stood up, slowly, and walked toward me. His eyes were cold. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to send a message. "You call this respect?" he said. It wasn't about the 15 minutes. It never was. It was about control. That night, he didn't yell. He didn't have to. He just kept his grip until my hand tingled, then let go and went upstairs without another word. I stood in the hallway for a long time before I followed. After that, it became little things. If dinner wasn't ready exactly at 7 o'clock, he'd scrape his fork against the plate until my skin crawled. If I laughed too loud at something on TV, he'd lower the volume and just look at me. And then came the first real blow. We were getting ready for a friend's wedding. I couldn't find my black heels. I told him I might wear the blue ones instead. His face changed instantly. He said I was trying to embarrass him, that the blue didn't match his suit. I laughed nervously, wrong move. His hand shot out so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap echoed in the room. My cheek burned, my ears rang. He didn't apologize. He just told me to fix my face before we left. In the car, he held my hand the whole drive. But not like a husband. More like a reminder that he owned me. After that, the physical abuse came in waves. Some weeks, it was just words, sharp, cutting, meant to slice me down piece by piece. Other weeks, it was worse. A shove into the kitchen counter when I didn't answer quickly enough. A kick to the back of my legs when I walked away from an argument. The worst night was in December. Snow had been falling all day, the kind that made the world look quiet and peaceful. But inside, it was chaos. He accused me of flirting with a cashier. I told him he was imagining things. His face went blank the way it did before the storm. He grabbed me by the hair and slammed me against the wall. My head hit so hard my vision blurred. I could taste blood from biting my lip. He kept shouting, but I couldn't hear the words anymore, just a ringing in my ears. When he finally let go, I slid down the wall, dizzy and shaking. He stood over me, breathing hard, then just walked away, leaving me on the floor. I stayed. I wish I could say I left that night, but fear is a cage you can't see until you're outside of it. He convinced me I was the problem, that no one else would want me, that I was lucky to have him. It took another year, and one terrifying night where I thought he might actually kill me, for me to finally run. I packed a bag while he was asleep, heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake him. I left the house in my slippers, clutching my car keys like a lifeline. The police helped me get a restraining order, but the bruises, those faded long before the nightmares did. When people ask why women stay, I tell them it's never just one bad night. It's a slow erosion of who you are until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Leaving isn't the hard part. Believing you deserve to leave, that's the battle. I used to believe love could heal anything, that if you poured enough kindness into someone, you could erase their pain, their darkness, their flaws. That's what I thought when I met Daniel. He was charming, attentive, and spoke to me like I was the only person in the room. But now, looking back, I realized that what I thought was love was a trap. We met at a bookstore cafe. I was browsing the mystery novels when he walked in, tall, well-dressed, with that confident but not arrogant smile. We struck up a conversation about the book in my hand. He told me I had the kind of eyes you don't forget. By our third date, I was convinced he was the man I'd been waiting for. He listened, remembered the little things I said, and brought me coffee just the way I liked it. 3 months later, he proposed. My friends said it was too soon, but I told them, when you know. What I didn't realize was that Daniel had been studying me. Not to love me, but to control me. It started on our honeymoon. I wore a sundress to dinner, and he leaned over the table, smile still plastered on his face, and whispered, "That dress is a little short, don't you think? You don't want men looking at you like that." I laughed it off, thinking it was just a protective gesture. But then it happened again, and again. By the time we got home, he'd suggest what I should wear, who I should talk to, and how much time I should spend with my family. At first, it felt like he just cared, but soon caring turned into controlling. The first time he raised his voice, I froze. It was over something small. I forgot to buy his favorite brand of cereal. His voice was sharp, his eyes cold. He apologized right after, saying he'd had a stressful day at work. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Then came the night he grabbed my wrist. We were at a friend's house and I laughed at a joke someone told. Daniel's smile faded. As soon as we got home, he slammed the door and yanked me into the hallway. His grip left a red mark that lingered for hours. "You embarrassed me," he said. I tried to explain, but his voice cut through mine. "You don't talk when I'm talking." I told myself it was just a bad moment, but those moments became the pattern of our marriage. The bruises were never where anyone could see. The insults were always whispered so no one else would hear. And when I finally started to pull away, staying at work late, avoiding his touch, he became sweet again. Dinners, flowers, apologies that sounded like promises. That was his cycle. Hurt me, then heal me just enough to keep me from leaving. One night, I decided to pack a bag. My hands were shaking as I zipped it closed. But before I could reach the door, he stepped out of the shadows. I hadn't heard him come in. "Where are you going?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were dead. I said I was going to my sister's for the weekend. He walked up to me, unzipped the bag, and slowly took out every piece of clothing I'd packed. "You're my wife," he said. "We don't run from each other." That night, I slept with the lights on, staring at the door, knowing I was trapped. The breaking point came a week later. He had been drinking, pacing the kitchen, muttering to himself. When I asked if he was okay, he slammed his fist on the table and told me to shut up before I made him do something I'd regret. I realized then that no amount of love or patience could fix him. This wasn't someone who was broken and needed healing. This was someone who enjoyed having power over me. I waited until he left for work the next morning. I didn't pack a bag this time, just grabbed my purse, my phone, and my keys. I drove straight to my sister's house and told her everything. She called the police before I could talk myself out of it. When they arrested him, I felt a nothing. Not relief, not fear, just emptiness. Because the truth is, when you marry a monster, they don't just hurt you physically. They drain you until there's nothing left. I'm still rebuilding my life. Some nights, I wake up in a cold sweat, certain I'll see him standing in the corner. But I remind myself, I left, I survived. And monsters can only keep their power if you stay in the dark. I've stepped into the light now, and I'm never going back. I always told myself that the first time didn't count. It was an accident. An argument had gotten heated, and I'd said something sharp, something about his job, and he just shoved me. It wasn't a malicious shove, not at first. It was a shove of pure frustration, and I stumbled back, my hands catching the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. The ceramic vase on the counter, a wedding gift from my grandmother, fell to the floor and shattered. He stared at the pieces, and then at me, and his face was a mask of horror. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I would never hurt you." He spent the next 3 days making it up to me. Flowers, dinner, a heartfelt card. I was so desperate to believe him. I wanted to believe that the man I married was the man begging for forgiveness, not the man who had pushed me. So I convinced myself it was an isolated incident, an accident, a broken vase, not a broken marriage. But the vase was just the beginning. The next time, the shove was harder. And the time after that, it was a slap. It was always over something small. I'd misplace his keys, or I wouldn't hear the phone ring, or I'd accidentally burn dinner. He would start with the words, the familiar insults that cut deeper than any knife, and then he'd get quiet. That was my warning. That was the moment my heart would begin to pound, the moment my body would tense up in anticipation. I learned to walk on eggshells that were invisible to everyone else, but felt like razor blades to me. I learned how to stand and speak in a way that wouldn't agitate him. I started wearing long-sleeved shirts and turtlenecks, even in the summer, to hide the bruises that bloomed on my arms and my neck. I became a master of makeup, covering up the black and blue that his hands had left behind. The worst part of it wasn't just the pain. It was the cycle that followed. The rage would give way to tears. He'd hold me and apologize, his voice a broken whisper, promising that he didn't know what came over him. He'd say he loved me more than anything. And in those moments, he seemed so genuinely sorry that I would fall for it again. I would cling to the hope that this time his promise was real, that the bad man inside him was gone for good. But the bad man was never gone. He was just waiting. The time between the rage and the remorse grew shorter and shorter, until there was no honeymoon period at all. Just a constant, low-level dread. The final time, I saw it coming. The argument was about money, and he was getting that look in his eyes, that quiet coldness that I knew so well. I braced myself, my arms instinctively crossing over my chest. I watched his hand rise, not in anger, but with a horrifying sense of inevitability. And for the first time, as he hit me, I didn't feel pain. I felt a horrifying clarity. I saw the man I had married, and the man I had pretended to love, and they were the same person. The apologies, the tears, the promises, they were all just part of the same script. I wasn't just in a bad relationship. I was in a war, and I was losing. When he came to me afterward, his face wet with tears, I didn't feel a flicker of pity. I just felt a cold, determined resolve. The vase wasn't the only thing that was broken. I was too. And the only way to fix myself was to walk away from the person who was breaking me.